Hello, and welcome once again to the wide world of zombie movies. This week's movie is Let Sleeping Corpses Lie from 1974.
By the way, it's also known as Don't Open the Window, Brunch with the Dead, and The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, just to name a few.
But before we get too far, spoiler alert! This movie begins with George, the owner of a small shop of antiques. He's closing up for the holidays and taking a couple of artifacts with him for a private buyer. Less than 5 minutes later, we get fan service in the form of a random shrieking woman. You never see the woman again after this. It's not necessary to the plot, it's just there. After that is a long travel sequence. I guess the writer thought, there's going to be a lot of boring crap at the beginning of the film. Let's throw in some nudity to keep things interesting. All the straight women watching this will just have to wait for the zombie action later. Anyway, George stops for gas and runs into Edna. Or rather, she runs into him. She accidentally backs into his motorcycle, rendering it inoperable until repaired, which won't be until Monday. So she agrees to get him to his destination. He insists on driving, which she's okay with because she's tired anyway. He tells her she can sleep if she wants to. Yeah, there's a stranger driving you to an unknown location that's already upset with you for wrecking his bike, and you're gonna leave him in charge of what happens to you while you're sleeping. This sounds like the beginning to a different type of horror movie, one where you find out later that the motorcycle was actually stolen, involves an abandoned warehouse, various medieval implements of destruction, and some kind of twist where she ran over his favorite uncle years earlier. But anyway, after some small talk, they get to a fork in the road, and she insists they go to her destination first. Edna's sister needs her, and George can even take the car to get to where he's going, and she'll get someone to pick it up later. Awful trusting, isn't she? He agrees, and they proceed to her sister's. Unfortunately, they get lost, and he gets out to ask for directions at a farm while Edna stretches her legs. George runs across some guys working for the experimental wing of the agriculture department. They're killing harmful insects by blasting ultrasonic radiation into the ground. Currently covering a 1-mile radius, they're trying for 5. There might be some odd side effects on the environment they're not ready for. Just a hunch. Anyway, they give him directions. Meanwhile, a new member of the Corpse Club pops up from a nearby graveyard and makes its way to Edna. By the way, the zombies in this film are a lot like classic Romero zombies. They move quite slowly, primitively use objects, and eat people. But their method of spreading the zombie curse is odd. More on that later. Edna runs from the zombie and jumps in the car without closing the window. The zombie reaches in, but she quickly hops out the other side, runs a few steps, and trips. Zombie movie bingo, anyone? She spots George and runs to him, telling him what just occurred. It was probably just a hobo wanting money, they say. She's satisfied with that for now. A little ways from there, we meet Katie and Martin. Katie is Edna's sister and a drug addict. Martin is her husband and a nature photographer. He's heading out to set up a night camera when he finds Katie sneaking around. They have a brief run-in, and we learn he intends to send her away for treatment. That's why he needs Edna. He goes on to set up the night camera, and while he's out, she gets attacked by the same zombie that attacked Edna earlier. That zombie can really cover some ground when it wants to, I guess. She escapes and runs to Martin. But the zombie follows her and kills Martin. The camera is snapping off pictures one by one. Katie runs away and is rescued by her sister and George. The next day, the police are investigating the scene led by Jerk Sergeant. Everyone has to stay nearby until the mystery is solved. Katie gives the sergeant a description of the zombie. Her account matches the exact description Edna told George about earlier. But the police sergeant is already blaming Katie and discounts everything else. It's getting late. Edna and George can't stay there. They have to stay at a hotel for now. On the way out, they notice that the police have the film from the night camera in the squad car. George swipes the film and they turn it in for development close to the hotel. They're staying at the Old Owl Hotel. And what do they find when they walk in? An old owl on a perch. Edna is immediately given a message that her sister has had a breakdown and was taken to the local hospital. Really? A recovering heroin addict has her husband slaughtered in front of her, is accused of murder, and left by herself with no one to console her. No wonder she had a breakdown. Anyway, a quick scene shows the experimental wing of the agriculture department, from here on out known as EAD, is still hard at work with the ultrasonic radiation. Finally at the hospital, Edna visits her sister while George wanders around and smokes. He speaks to a doctor briefly before an emergency draws both of them to the nursery. Another newborn has become homicidal. Ferocious and vicious. George was almost hurt. Oh my! This was the third baby born from an area near where the EAD is operating. George tells the doctor this, and they drop everything to go check it out. The EAD tell them it's absurd and they leave. Later, the film is ready but no pictures of the zombie can be found. The police had gotten there first. During the interaction, we learn that the sergeant thinks they're troublemakers anyway and has a personal beef against their kind. After the sergeant leaves, George and Edna learn the zombie's name and leave to check out the grave. An officer is sent to follow them, but loses them at the fork. They get to the graveyard and make their way into a creepy crypt. Sure enough, the zombie's coffin is empty. Someone seals the crypt though, trapping them. It's the zombie. They try to escape, but then the zombie does something weird. He takes his fingers and wipes blood on the eyes of some of the corpses nearby. A short time later, they rise. Anyway, George and Edna barely escape with the help of the officer who's finally caught up to them. He radios his position to the sergeant, but drops the radio when the zombies chase the three into the caretaker's shack. During the scuffle to survive, we learn that headshots don't work. The officer believes that if he can get to his radio and call for help, they'll make it. Unfortunately, he dies trying, and the zombies set him up to turn. George uses fire to take out the zombies and they escape. They leave the dead officer there and go for help. George heads off to stop the EAD, while Edna goes to find the police. More zombies rise and start killing. George learns that the ultrasonic radiation is up to 5 miles and stops the machine, but the EAD workers think he's mad and leave to report him to the police. Meanwhile, at the cemetery, the sergeant finds the dead officer, who hasn't risen yet, and the burned corpses and assumes that George and Edna are drug-crazed Satanists. The sergeant gives the order to shoot on sight. George and Edna are briefly united. Edna is quite shaken up and is left at a gas station while George leaves to burn the body of the officer before it rises. Edna begins freaking out and the gas station attendant calls the hospital to pick her up. At the graveyard, a trap catches George and they haul him off to the station for interrogation. The dead officer has been taken to the hospital morgue. As this is happening, we find out that the EAD has the ultrasonic radiation device working again. At the station, the police have found the artifacts that George had been carrying with him and use these to back up their Satanist theory. Moments later, George makes a daring escape and learns where Edna is from the gas station attendant. He speeds off to the hospital. In the hospital morgue, the dead cop rises and kickstarts the next zombie uprising. A couple of floors up, Katie learns her sister is there and asks the doctor if she can visit. The doc says sure, but on the way there, zombies attack and kill them both. Edna's happy to see her sister at first, but quickly begins screaming as she's attacked. Hearing screaming, a nurse begins to go investigate. Another nurse stops him, telling him it's nothing. The woman was screaming earlier. Nice. Edna barely escapes her sister, but can't leave the room as more zombies are coming in. George finally arrives at the hospital and sees zombies blocking his path. He quickly makes a torch and burns a path to Edna's room. Arriving at her room, he burns the zombies inside and rescues her. A few seconds too late. She's a zombie. He pushes her into the flaming room before she can attack him, and she burns. Suddenly, gunshots erupt all around, cutting George down. It's the police, who think that George has been burning everyone to death. A short time later, the sergeant is surrounded by media and being hailed a hero. Apparently, no one witnessed any zombies and believed the drug-crazed Satanist theory. The sergeant, once inside his car and away from the media, tells his officer he needs sleep. A couple of nights at the local hotel. He gets there, goes to his room, and is about to settle down when, oh no, it's Zombie George. He's been waiting in the shadows for him. The sergeant is killed off. The end. Let's start off by saying I actually like this movie. It had issues, mostly at the end, but it wasn't that bad. Having said that, a few questions arise. How did he shamble out of the morgue without being noticed? How did the hotel miss a slow-walking zombie enter? How did Zombie George know which room to go to? How did he enter a locked room without a key? So many questions the ending creates. I like the movie except for the ending. It makes you wonder if someone else had a hand in it, studio execs or something. Anyway, discounting the end, I gave it a 7 out of 10. By the way, I also learned that Mini Coopers existed since the 60s, because they used one in the movie. Yay, learning! Well, that's all for this week, so until next time, be safe, be smart, be ready.